Welcome to another episode on evangelism, how sharing our faith causes a ripple effect. And we just did one where we shared about people who impacted our lives and how they shared their faith and walked with us. And to use that term evangelize to us, even though a lot of us already knew God was at the time, but still poured into us and shared their faith through their lifestyle by being vulnerable with us, by being transparent, relational, loving. I now would love to ask, now that we understand who did that or who shared their faith with you and walked with you, how are you personally sharing your faith and evangelizing to other people?
I think for me, just like how the two people that I mentioned, they've really, took care of me and they poured their life into me and was just there for me, and walking with me. I think I tried to do the same way with other people, just really walking with people and hearing them and giving them, time for us to connect and talk about, things, whether it's things like they're going through or just to be a listening, a person that could just listen to them. And I think it's all about building trust, right? And building that trust and that relational capital. And also, as I'm doing that, not being scared to share my own story of who Jesus is to my life, right? And not being afraid to even mention the name of Jesus, because I can't share my story without Jesus, right? Because he's just part of my life. He's made that much of an impact. So so I think as I build trust and relationship with people, it's by spending time with them and then spending time with me, and being able to open my life to them and invite them into my life, and hoping that they would also invite themselves, where I could enter into their lives, and then be able to for me to share my story, in that way. So and so I've been meeting with a lot of youth in our neighborhood, right? And it's been very interesting because I've been talking to them and meeting with them more on a weekly basis, and a lot of them kept saying "Oh, David, you don't have to buy us. Why are you so nice?" They keep saying that. It's "Oh, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for doing this." And it's not just me, but it's even the programs that we ran, the church. And they know the Elm Church is doing all this, right? So it's for me, it's wow, for me, it's I feel I I'm not doing much, but for them, it's so big. It's they never. Why is you don't have to show this much care to me? But it's oh, it's not a burden to me. I want to. I just want you guys to know that I'm here for you guys. I care for you guys. And I haven't mentioned the name of Jesus, right? But they know we are a church. They know I'm a pastor. They know I'm a Christian, right? And then because of that, there's conversations about me being able to share my story of why my faith is important to me. And they just listen, and we have a dialogue. So, it's been very interesting to see that.
Yeah, and I would say it's been really impactful too, just to kind of throw something in there. I ran into one of the youth students that you meet with regularly at the roastery, and the way that she connected with me and was very eager to say hi and strike up a conversation. That's not something that would have happened without you being a part of her life. And I was just very moved by that she felt so safe with our community through you that she just started a conversation with me, and then I just thought, wow, she's making these connections because she's receiving this kind of, I guess, loving, listening, support from you. That was really cool. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so I think in that way, that's how I'm, kind of sharing my faith, and then hoping that as I gain their trust and gain the right, and then when the time is right, being able to invite them to church, or if they will want to learn more, more than welcome, but if they don't, that doesn't stop our relationship. We're still gonna be there for them and be a support to them and to a resource for them, and and just be there. So I think in that way, I would say that's how I'm like sharing my faith in the way I interact with people and the way I live my life and how I treat people and stuff like that.
I also just love seeing how you meet with like even the brothers at our church, and you have an intentionality of doing that. It's and I gotta say, I feel like it is harder for men to do that. But you not only do that with the youth, kids that you direct over, you also do this with other men. And I witnessed that even last night at the bar. Just like really cool that we're able to do that. So I think that's really cool that you have this want to build these relationships in the neighborhood that we live in. So that's something to note there as well. Yeah. Sorry, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the hymn. They'll know that we're Christians by their love. They will know that we're Christians by our love. And it's never they'll know that we are Christians by what we say, by what we show in terms of like vain things. I'm thinking of that because when I think of sharing my faith, I'm really focused on my mentality going into it. And what I'm going into is a connection. It's how am I going to treat that person? How am I going to speak to that person? And the mentality for me is very important, because if I'm thinking of it as just another thing to check off, another number, and then if they say no or something and I'll just move on like they didn't matter, that to me is a big no-no, and I would need to rethink why I'm doing it in the first place. So sharing my faith starts with my mentality. Am I going to love this person? Am I going to accept this person, whether they say yes or no, or they want to listen to me or not? And so I think a lot of it is being authentic, and how am I spending that time? What's going through my mind as I'm spending that time with them? How to be a good listener. And if they're sharing something with me, and I think you mentioned earlier in one of the first or second videos that we did, that if they are, when you're having a conversation, it's really, a lot of it is listening. So when we're evangelizing, a lot of it is listening, how to be a good listener. And I wouldn't be a good listener if someone was sharing their heart with me and I'm thinking of the next thing to say, of how I can get them. Yeah. So if I'm already thinking of that, I just feel like this conversation needs to end. I need to just go home. Not even the other person. The other person can stay where they are. I need to go home and bring myself home and clean up my act, because that's not being authentic. That's not being loving. And nothing else I say would matter, because I'm not being loving. I'm not showing my love to them by being a good listener, of focusing on what they're saying. And so I think that's a big way of how I try to share my faith, being a good listener, giving that time and not treating them like a number. They say yes or no to Jesus, and then I move on if they don't care for what I have to say. I have to care for what they have to say. So that's like the very first thing for me. And then later on, what I share, like the stories of how I find hope in such and such, and depending on what they share with me and how I'm going to be a good listener and affirm them or validate what they say, like that's secondary. That's really secondary.
Sorry, I just realized it's really hard for us to talk about how we share our faith, but I have to say, like Sandy, the way that you share your faith has always been a huge impact to me as we think about evangelism at our church. Like just this year, your desire to have more intentional conversations with the children about like what Jesus means to you and what Jesus means to them, and how much you desire that. And yet there's always this first posture of listening to where they are coming from. You spend so much time building that connection before you talk to them about all these things. It's a lot of drawing out of them, the way that you play with them and spend all that time with the children. And I see that and I go, man, that reminds me of Jesus. Because when the crowds came to him hungry, he didn't first talk about faith in the kingdom. He first fed them, and there was this feeding and meeting them where they were. And then he would share, hope with them and what the kingdom is about. And I see that in your approach, because you meet them in their real needs, these children, their needs to connect, their needs to talk about their highs and lows and show up, and you're so good about receiving that so that they feel like they're heard and they're valued, they're loved. And then they start to go, okay, so tell us more. And then you have this avenue to share Jesus, and it really does seem to stick with the kids.
Speaking of the highs and lows, even this morning in Sunday school, there's one child that sometimes doesn't want to go into the room because they're just really cool at this point. But today in Sunday school, I said, I have a big lesson ahead of us, a few games that I want to play. Only 2 people can share the highs and lows today. So that child wasn't one of the 2. And afterwards, like at the end of the lesson, he asked me, when are we going to do highs and lows again? And I said, next week, I'm sure Sophie will give that chance. It's like, so now he's really looking forward to, he just wants to, the whole Sunday school session, regardless of the games and the stories that I tell, he just really wanted to share his highs and lows. So I felt bad. So later on, after service, I was able to go, you had a high and low. Did you want to share it? And he shared it. Yeah. So I really do look forward to that.
And you're so good.
It's like modeled in your approach, you know,
Yeah,
the listening. Yeah, the listening first, it's really there.
Yeah. Dave, what about you? I know that this is weird to ask you as a pastor, church planter. What have you done to share your faith? No,
it's so funny because when you asked that question, I was like, I'm not going to be the first to answer this because I need to think about it a little bit.
But almost like this question really is, and it's okay, right? Like we should be almost be proud of what we've done. So it's almost like a boasting session. So please, boast away.
He loves to do that.
I don't know if this will be a boasting session. I mean, we planted the church because we were thinking about how people connect and how God pulls us into community, both with Him and with others, and between us in community. And at the heart of that is the gospel. And so I don't believe that you can build the healthiest communities without the gospel. There has to be a way in which we deal very honestly with our brokenness, but in a way that is forgiving, reconciling, and gracious. It has to be loving, but it has to be honest. And so I look at the gospel and go, that's the answer. That's the only way that we could do human communities well. And so, gospel is always going to be a part of what we do. But then I was thinking about the progression of church planting and how it looked so different when we started. When we first started, I was sitting at the bar all the time at Patty's and just waiting for a conversation to unfold. And I had all this time to just wait for a conversation to take place. And, I could dream up of like a basketball tournament for the youth and just kind of rally some people together and do a neighborhood basketball tournament, try to talk to kids about their lives and listen to what they're going through. If there's an opportunity, share a little bit about faith and what we value. But that's changed so much. It's changed so much now that we have more people to tend to. There's more effort behind the sermon to teach the gospel in a way that everyone can take something and then apply to their lives, apply to the community. A lot more organizational stuff above with the church, managing staff, team, initiatives, overall direction. There's just a lot that happens behind the scenes, a lot of things that pull me away from, I guess, more of those grassroots conversations. In fact, I was just writing about this in my doctoral class not too long ago, that this year I really feel a desire to spend more time in that interpersonal space and talk to people one-on-one. I really love the one-on-one conversations. I feel like I've drifted away from that in large part. And so I'm really enjoying these one-on-one conversations that I'm having now, where I could talk to individuals about faith, about the questions that they have. And that's been really rewarding. I won't say who they are, but it's been really rewarding to have those one-on-one conversations again. Because it has for a while been just sermons and getting the platform that people use ready. I think our church does a lot, and that allows people to have these conversations about faith with others because they know that they're coming from the Elm Church. And when people in our neighborhood say, oh, you're from the Elm. Okay, like, what is it that you guys believe? There's a willingness to hear that story because we're so involved in loving our city. That all of that takes like our staff and our team a lot of it. It's a lot of work for us to manage all of that, so that our people can have those conversations. But yeah, I'm really enjoying kind of coming back to the one-on-one conversations again.
So crazy. I feel like even as you're speaking, I was like, well, you are always sharing your faith because you're preaching. And like, I'm like, my gosh, that's like 60 people per Sunday. I can't even do one.
Like when you were sharing that, I'm hearing a lot of indirect and direct. And even though you said, oh, you feel like you haven't really had those conversations where you're sharing directly, I feel like to share your faith, you need to feel safe. You have to have a space.
Right.
You have to have the ability, the time to meet with somebody, and you have to have the voice. So I feel like things need to be in place so that people can share their faith. And I feel like you and Lester and the core team a lot too has been creating the foundations, creating the platform to share faith, like hospitality committee. Right. A lot of people are offering their homes, meals, and that's to have that, you're building this warmth where it goes back to what we're talking about, that connection, the time spent together, and through that, you can have stories. And if you didn't have that time together, can you really go into depth of all that Jesus is doing for you and just throwing the name around again? Mm-hmm. But you spent a lot of time putting things in place in church, lots of different platforms where people can share their faith.
Yeah. You're definitely doing a lot. I don't even know how pastors do that because I'm like, this is too much. Goodbye. So crazy. I feel like, we naturally copy and improve what has been done to us. So a lot of these things that I'm hearing from all of you is like an impact of somebody, and therefore that's why we do these things. And I even think about just like we were talking about Jim earlier, and the way he impacted me was just really reaching out, seeing him reach out to the neighborhood. And for me, I'm like, wow, like I actually feel very blessed that I can see the fruit of sharing faith in this neighborhood. So like this is now like probably like my 20th year doing ministry here in Elmhurst. I have the privilege of now seeing like what people used to be when they were like in elementary school or even teenagers, now to be their, like adults, and how the impact of the church has on them and now what they're doing, and even like how much they're serving. And I think that's really cool to see, just because someone has done that to me. And it sounds like even for all of you that someone has done something with you, something relational, vulnerable. They're very authentic with you and just loved on you, that now we're all able to continue this race and this run. Thank you so much for sharing how you're, sharing your faith with the neighborhood and with people around you. I know that's a very uncomfortable thing of just telling people what you're doing, but it is important, right? Because I think people need to see that when there's an impact, there's also this natural result. Like we're a very result-driven society, so though we don't really name it often, I do want to at least like name it here that because someone's done that to us, now there's a natural result that comes out of it because of this, just because someone evangelized to us or shared their faith with us. So thank you so much for listening and just hearing us out and how we're doing that here especially with this term evangelism and the ripple effects of it. So please join us for the next one. We'll be talking about how our church specifically at the Elm is doing evangelism. Thank you.